Big tech, media, and current culture are all encouraging us to play a finite game because it's much easier to basically control and manipulate us. Part of freedom, then, is recognizing that and turning away to play the infinite game. A finite game is just that, finite. It has a number of options and players, clearly defined winners and losers, and an established set of rules. This is chess or checkers for sure, but it's also politics, sports, and war. In infinite games, the field of play is mutable, the number of participants keeps changing, and the only goal is to keep on playing. Art, science, and love are infinite games. That was from Stephen Kotler, The Art of Impossible. Fascinating book, definitely well worth a read. Life itself is an infinite game, and it's only made finite by the control of resources, time, and reframing life itself through culture. Truthfully, I think a lot of people feel like a finite game is much more comfortable. It's easier to understand, and you get to win or lose. In fact, in movies and most of culture, we love to have a winner and a loser. And when we do that, it sets up a dynamic that's much easier to say who the winners and who the losers are. This video is sponsored by Epiphany mugs, where the epiphany is in the mug. The whole idea is to basically have your coffee or tea and epiphany at the same time. You read the mug, contemplate it while you're drinking your coffee, and by the end have an epiphany. An example mug is this, the attitude of gratitude. This mug sparks you to think of 3 things you're grateful for while you're having your coffee. And this gratitude in turn inspires you to have a much better day or have epiphanies you might not have had before. There's new mugs all the time, and they're all designed with the same idea in mind, to have an epiphany by the time you're done with your coffee or tea. Check out the link in the description below, and remember, the epiphany is in the mug. Even if only a small percentage of people actually win of the percentage of people that play, people still love it because there's a chance that they will be part of the small percentage that win. Now, life itself should be an infinite game where the only goal is to keep on playing, and yet more often than not, we are encouraged to have finite goals. Like everything else, it's easier to conclude that it's an us versus them, or in this case, finite versus infinite game. Finite games are fun. Checkers are fun. Chess are fun. When you know that you're playing a finite game, it's awesome. And you can have a lot of fun with it. It's just having a balance between the two and basically acknowledging when you're doing one or the other. I'm convinced that when you focus on the infinite game, you actually are able to be less manipulated and have a lot more enjoyment at the same time. In a sense, it's another piece of the puzzle that actually puts freedom back into your control through individual choices that you make, rather than thinking that this is overarching people that are controlling everything. When you're able to flip that dynamic, you can take control and have freedom in different ways. And when you start to put these freedom puzzles together, overall, they paint a far different picture than a lot of what we see currently in our culture. Now, one way to play the infinite game is to look at epigenetics. Now, according to the CDC, epigenetics is the study of how your behavior's environment can cause changes that affect the way your genes work. Your environment, your behaviors, the choices that you make affect your abilities. Instead of it being a pre-written script, epigenetics actually opens yourself up to the infinite game where you can make choices and through those choices have more abilities and have more experiences and be able to do more things.
Rather than being victims of our heredity, we now recognize we're masters of our genetic fate because we can change our beliefs, our environment, our mind, and those are the things that control our biology.
Instead of it all being chosen for you. And on into life as you get older, you can actually be in better shape than you were when you were younger. And it's not just an idea. It's something that actually can happen. And when you look at your life that way, the potential, just as with in metaphysics where they say that life is full of potential energy at every given moment, meaning the potential to do pretty much anything and go anywhere is present within every moment that we live. And in that sense, epigenetics opens that possibility up for us and allows us to say, hey, you know what? I'm going to go and do this, that, and the other thing. And you should. Because, in fact, if you look at epigenetics, you can do this, that, or the other thing. What we're after in all this is a freedom to achieve our greatest expression of who we are, unlimited by current ways of thinking and believing. In this sense, we break free the invisible chains of doubt shackled on us from the moment we wake up to the moment we go to sleep at night. In fact, what's limiting you isn't you at all. It's just the automatic expression of you engaged daily called habits. Start breaking those down, and then you're on your way by intentionally updating your life. Harvard psychologist William James explained it like this. The human individual lives usually far within his limits. He possesses powers of various sorts which he habitually fails to use. He energizes below his maximum, and he behaves below his optimum. In that sense, then, we're basically living life well below our potential. And that's by design, because we get into habits that reinforce this idea that we are basically led to believe that we're genetically going to have this or that, and it's because of our parents early on, our circumstances early on that formed everything, and then now we're just expressing all that out, and we have very little choice for what happens to us because we're just thrown to the wind, and it seems like we have choice, but every time we try to make that choice, something always happens, and really, it's just those habits getting in the way. So the infinite game says, oh, no. All of that is wide open. You can express yourself in a certain way when you're 19 and very different when you're 40. And you can be a completely different person, even if you have those same genes. You can awaken abilities in yourself by going through a process of rediscovering what you have. So for example, maybe you want to do videos, but you feel like you're shy, like you have a genetic disposition towards being shy, when in fact you can break all those barriers, which are basically habits you've ingrained over time. You can identify those, slowly carve them in a different direction. And in that sense, you can turn yourself from being shy to being outward, to not doing video, to being a presenter at TED. It's all by design. And when you take your life and you say, I want to design my life in this way, then you open up those parameters. And then it's just opening up the possibility and removing the fears and the doubts and all that kind of stuff. So the infinite game says all that's possible. The finite game says, no, you're basically, because of where you grew up, who your mother and father were, the genes they had, just the basic resources you had available to you, you're basically statistically going to be at that level for pretty much all your life. And if you try to go above that, then you'll be brought down because you'll be uncomfortable if you get higher. And so really your life is all determined for you. From The Art of Impossible, Stephen Kotler basically lets us know in no uncertain ways how we can expand our lives and live through the infinite game of possibility rather than being subjected to whatever limitations we think we might have, because our potential is way above where most of us currently are at. And we live well below that. When we push those boundaries move. Think of the 4-minute mile. It seemed impossible to go past. And then someone beat it, and then more and more people beat it. It's moving that line of impossibility. And along the way, of course, you stumble, fall, and whatever else happens. And that's all by design, because when that happens, you gain enough wisdom to keep going. If someone gave you a shortcut, one halfway up the mountain, you wouldn't have the wisdom necessary to get you to the top, because halfway up, your muscles wouldn't have gotten better. You wouldn't have gotten better. You wouldn't have trained to get there. You just would have taken the shortcut. And then when you try to make it the rest of the way, you just don't have what it takes. I'm saying that by design, we as a culture have this finite game within everything that we do. And that has allowed others to control us and manipulate us more easily. When you start to expand and look at the infinite game, such as with epigenetics or many other things in your life, then you open up this possibility and you reduce the ability of others to manipulate and control you. And in that sense, you get a bit of freedom. My suggestion is that all of us play the infinite game at a more conscious level. And when we do that, we'll be able to move much more consciously towards freedom in a lot of respects than if we just allow this finite game to rule pretty much everything that we do. For me, the book that I read with Stephen Kotler has been amazing. I read his The Rise of Superman, and I listened to the audiobook more than a couple times, and it's got so much there. We really have broken the boundaries in many different ways, but it comes from playfully breaking those boundaries rather than adhering to all these rules and all these things that have gone on in the past. On an individual level, our past tries to shape us because it stays in our mind. And yet, when we let go of that and see the future as wide open possibility without regard to what happened in the past, then it becomes more of an infinite game. It becomes more limitless. And in that sense, as a culture, it's the same way. We've had all this past, and we think because of that past that basically our choices are limited for us, when in fact our choices are infinite. And we can, as a culture, suddenly be able to do what we only thought was impossible before. And that's inspirational. And that's what I hope to leave you with. A bit of inspiration. Check out the book by Stephen Kotler. And if you found this video helpful, give it a like. Thanks a lot for watching, and I'll see you next time.